Jennifer Baxavanis and Dave Bradley. We both work in the field of sales consulting and coaching. I was inspired by a talk that I heard Dave give a few months ago around how cultural stereotypes, how they affect and how the implications of them, along with our mindset, how they affect how successful we will be in selling anything, whether that's a product or service, or whether that's selling ourselves, going for promotion at work. So I think this is going to be a very valuable and interesting talk for everyone in the room. Please welcome Jennifer and Dave.
Thank you very much. Now, talking about imposter syndrome, try being a man speaking at a women's event if you want to experience imposter syndrome. I think you've already found me out though. So firstly, we need to explain we are not trained actors, which will become very apparent in just a moment. We're going to cover three key things. Firstly, we want to look at some of the current perceptions of sales or business development or whatever you want to call it, and how they impact on many people when it comes to selling their products or services if they start their own business. And I know there's many of you at different stages of that. Many of you, as part of your career journeys, might be interested in moving into having your own business along the way. And one thing that I have noticed is that having met with lots of new business startup people, women and men, is often they don't understand how important the sales and business development side is, and often they bring through some of their background and history and their baggage associated with it. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at also, Jen's going to give you some ideas and some structure to help with business development, but also help influence any decision maker that you might be dealing with, even if it's a manager in another business unit if you're still in the corporate environment. And as well as that, we're going to kind of reinforce something that I'm sure everyone in this room knows, and that is there's some amazing talent in this room that you just need to tap into. So, should we do a little foray into the dramatic arts? I might need my script for this. So, a little bit of background. In the 10 years that I've lived here in Dubai, I've only ever tried to matchmake once. I had a friend of mine, a little bit older than me, who was you'll find out what his career was in just a minute. And then I had a client, a female client, who I started getting to know quite well. I thought these two should meet each other. They're both single, both active on Tinder. And I happened to have a table at a nice gala dinner type event, and I said, do you guys want to come together, individually of course, but they knew they were going there as a couple filling two seats. So I was full of hope, but what we're about to act out is very close to exactly what I heard happen. So, let's go. So, hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Alistair.
I'm Inga.
Oh, hi Inga.
Nice to meet you.
Great. Well, so what do you do here?
I work for SAP.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So what do you do?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a Emirates pilot. David might have mentioned.
Sure. Tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm a pilot on the A380. You probably could say that I'm a senior pilot, really, because whenever they're about to take delivery of a new plane, and I'll go to Germany and I'll sort of test flights. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a bit of a problem for me because I'm already at kind of the top of the aviation career. You can't go any bigger than the A380. So, it's sort of, I think that's probably why I started paragliding. I'm out playing quite a lot. I need the thrill. Sort of the thrills that I used to have when I was an Air Force fighter pilot. It's what I think I'm trying to experience. Yeah.
I'm just going to go run to the bar real quick. So I'll be back very soon.
Okay, great. So, very, very close to actual words that came out of my dear friend Alistair's mouth. we will revisit that very soon. But over to Jen.
So we named this chat the good, bad, and ugly of sales. And you can see from that last interaction that is one of the ugly. Dating has a really interesting sales aspect to it. As you can see, Alistair was trying to sell his product. And I was not buying. But sales actually has a face in many of the activities that we do. So I would like to turn it to you all and ask you, on a day-to-day basis, where do you feel like you're using sales or doing sales, where it kind of has the format of you trying to influence somewhere else? Can you all give me some ideas? Like in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. So the obvious ones, like the client and the...
Okay, we have, of course, sorry about that. We have like the client and the buyer situation, but what are some other situations that you are encountering on a day-to-day basis where you're having to sell?
Selling a girly movie to my husband.
Excellent example. Selling a girly movie to the husband.
Selling meal to a child.
Yeah.
Selling a meal to a child. Absolutely.
Or the cleaning the teeth afterwards.
Anything else?
Selling a kitten for adoption.
Selling a kitten for adoption. Absolutely. These are all great examples. Besides dating and besides the whole client-seller-buyer relationship, we're using sales all the time. And so some of the lessons that we're going to be sharing with you all and our experiences and some of the ideas that we have, we'd like to ask you to try them in these different situations. Maybe not the child one, but the other ones as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Dave, who's going to talk to us a little bit about preconceptions and beliefs about sales.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I've had the chance to talk to lots of people who are moving into starting up their own businesses. But I've also talked with lots of sales teams and trained lots of sales teams, and there are some similarities. So I have a question for you. When you think of selling and salespeople, what comes to mind? So just with the people at your table or the person next to you, very quickly, and I'm going to get some of your ideas back, when you think of selling and salespeople, what comes to mind? Go. Just go. No, what comes to mind? Your first things that come to your mind.
Just untrustworthy. Cowboys.
Pushy, kind of push the peak on, just desperate to close a deal,
Not really listening to
that would be my stereotype of sales.
uncomfortable situation.
Okay, guarantees type character.
Yeah. Maybe he didn't have the integrity.
Yeah.
Or the
Yeah.
Cheesy. That's what I mean. Okay, I think we've got some similar ideas coming up. Over here, what were some of the things you shared?
We said pushy.
Pushy. Type A personality, dominant sort of, yeah.
Hard to think outside the box.
Oh, sorry?
It's hard to think outside the box.
Okay.
Scripted speech.
Oh, right, so following a kind of a script, yeah. What else? What sort of industries come to mind? Car sales, real estate, financial advisors in this part of the world, I think, would come through. Advertising, yeah. Okay, so it's really interesting that these things come to mind, and when you think about how sales and salespeople are often portrayed in the media and in movies, it's not really surprising. Often the caricature of a salesperson is portrayed in the extreme sort of negative sort of a way. But it's been fascinating to me when I'm running sales training with groups of people who are in sales positions. Early on in the session, I will always ask them, so put up your hands if you consider yourself to be a salesperson. And it's amazing. They're in a sales training course for the sales team, and people are not putting their hands up. What do you think they tell me that their professions are? Consultants? Business development? Sorry? Yeah, relationship management, client services. I've heard so many account managers, so many different varying titles, which are all typically used to try and hide behind something that a lot of people in business development and sales fear. But I see the same thing with new people going into their own businesses. And what do you think the impact is? If you have these negative perceptions of selling and salespeople, how do you think that impacts on our ability? We've just set up a business, we've got a fantastic product or service, but what do we end up doing?
Underselling yourself.
Underselling, yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts?
Not feeling confident.
Not feeling confident, often avoiding it, trying to sell online, over email, kind of keeping out of the conversation, which is going to make me feel awkward. I don't want to be perceived as being pushy, so I don't want to be, I'll try to avoid some of those face-to-face things. One of the most common simple things that a lot of business owners do is they won't actually even share what the price of the product or service is face-to-face or over the phone. They'll say, I'll send you a quote, so that they don't have to be that person which they feel might be perceived as pushy. So it's a common barrier. It impacts on a lot of people actually selling great products and services, whether in the corporate world or if they're running their own business. What I learned, luckily, early in my career is selling is not about pushing somebody into a decision. It's about helping someone make a decision that's going to benefit them or their business. And when the switch clicked for me, it took the pressure off. I was just helping them make a decision that's beneficial to them. So a lot of the time, I will help them make a decision not to buy a product or service I'm providing, and I feel excited about it if that's the right decision for me. So Jen's now going to give you some thoughts on, in a more positive way, dropping some of the negative perceptions. How can we make sure we're still being proactive and making sure we're giving our products and services the light of day?
So thank you, Dave. The main issue, or the main takeaway I think Dave's trying to say, is selling should not be perceived as pushing. It should be perceived as helping. When my first sales job, when I was 20, I was quite influenced by the company I was working for. They had a very, very aggressive selling method. And what we were trained to do, which I'm not necessarily so proud of, but I didn't know the difference because it was my first sales job, is we were trained to be on-the-spot closers as well as objection handling machines, which meant we would go and see potential clients, and we were encouraged by our targets to close exactly on the spot, signing a contract within the same meeting. So our contracts, the minimum contract is $50,000. I signed contracts all the way up to $250,000 in 2 hours. How did I do that? I was trained on how to run the meeting in a way where at the very end, I would almost be forcing the prospect to take the services. Of course, I wasn't there with my hands around his neck or anything like that. But then we learned what was objections. There was no prospect after I cornered him that would ever say, yes, I want to take your services. It was always a no, 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 which is what we call objections. We were trained on objection handling. We would listen to the objection and then go of our Rolodex of different objections and pull out the right response and keep on going through that process of no, 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 response, response, in order to turn that no into a yes. So, do you all think that I was actually helping this prospect with these kind of services? I definitely wasn't. And the company I worked for did not care about that. They wanted the contract and they wanted the money.
How did you feel at the time?
I really didn't know the difference, but I made me feel really, really bad. I felt like I was cheating them. And what made it worse is our contracts had 2 weeks of cancellation. Our company would encourage us to basically hide from the client for those 2 weeks. No contact, radio silence. And then after 2 weeks to then take up, once again, the communication or to deliver what we were promising. And that was a very abrupt way of me starting sales. And I used to run around and say, I'm the on-the-spot, closer. But now I would never say that. My next sales job, I was really lucky because I moved to London. I was working for a publishing house that really encouraged us to make long-term relationships with our clients, to do long campaigns with us. And so my sales process and sales methodology completely changed because the company asked me help them find out what they want and then move forward. So if selling is helping and we don't want to be pushy, how can we actually take that theory and put it into our day-to-day interactions when it is selling a product or service or selling an idea like, I want my husband to go to this girl movie with me. How do we do it? So I'm going to give you, I guess, what Ruthie called the secret formula of how I help a lot of other professionals and sales teams increase their sales interactions with these kinds of steps. So the first step is focus. So today in modern selling or modern influence is to take the focus away from your product or service or the idea that you're selling and transfer it on the person that you want to influence, whether that be your husband or a potential client. So what that means is if I'm looking at my product and service that I might know really, really well, it doesn't really matter in the sales interaction. What I need to do is put myself in the place of the person I'm trying to influence and think about what are they thinking? What are the outcomes that they want to have? What are their potential needs? So I sit down and I actually forecast that, whether it be talking to my loved one or talking to a potential client. I just put myself in that situation. Let's take an example, a very simplistic one, and a furniture shop. It's a retail situation, so it's not so many control factors. But if you have a salesperson in there that knows everything about the table and the chair and the sofa, that's really that unnecessary. What's really important is to think, when someone's coming in, what are they thinking about? What do you think someone's coming into a furniture store is thinking about? Are they thinking about furniture? What are they thinking about? They're thinking about their home and their style and their living space and their colors and the feeling that they want to have in their home that they're redecorating or a new home that they're moving in, not necessarily about that piece of furniture. So step 2 is taking that focus into a dialogue. So we have a very, very special saying in sales, which is, if you want to sell, don't tell. So what does that mean? It means if you want to sell, question, but question doesn't rhyme with sell, so we can't really use that. So if you want to sell, don't tell, which is the art of questioning. So if you take that focus and you are looking at what the customer could possibly want or the person you're trying to influence, and you've already forecasted, maybe they want this or maybe this is the outcome that they want to achieve, you can start to formulate questions in your head instead of talking about your product or service of how can I get them to talk about the outcomes that they desire, their needs, or the results that they want, and put those into question forms. Now, 2 things happen when you do that. Number 1, our favorite subject is me, myself, and I. So if you get me talking about me, myself, and I feel really, really comfortable with you. So having a list of questions really helps you build a connection with the person you're trying to influence. The second thing is, the questions will allow you to validate some of the ideas that you already had about what they want. And for the example of the furniture store, it's like, well, if someone comes in and asks, you say, well, what is it that you want to do? Are you moving into a new house? Is it an old house? And then the customer can tell you, well, actually, no, I just want to change the colors of my living room. Or, no, I actually have an old couch and I want to throw it away and get a new one and some new side tables. And that way, you can start to understand their needs. Now, if they can't validate some of the outcomes that you have already forecasted, it doesn't matter because you've opened up the dialogue with questions for them to actually tell you what they want and need. Let me give you another example is, if you want to sell, don't tell. Here, who uses creams on their face? Okay, this is like an all-women's group, don't lie. So there's a company here that they'll bring you a basket of different creams that you can use, and then you later give them feedback on the creams that you want, and then they sell them to you. So recently had an interaction. And of course, people who sell to me, I get really, really excited because I'm always helping people sell. So when I get sold to, I'm always watching their process. So the lady brings me the creams, and then she starts telling me all about the creams. And she's telling me about the history and this and that, and I get kind of bored, just like I was as Inga here in the dating situation. And so I thought about it. How could she improve this sales interaction? And what she could do is ask me what I want. So there's a question, Jennifer, why are you looking to buy creams? Think about all the different answers I could answer. I could say, actually, I want to start using natural products. Actually, I would like to use something for my wrinkles. Or with this weather change, my skin is very dry. Now, in these three situations, the way she presents the creams is going to completely change. Instead of me getting bored, listening to everything she wants to say about the creams, I could have had a better experience with just her asking me a few questions. She could have started telling me how all the products are all natural, or she could have told me about the special ingredient that fights age. Why we're always fighting age, but anyways, it's a different chat. Or she could talk to me a little bit about how the creams help with dry skin. And it would have saved her the time and me the energy. And maybe the sale result would have been better. So to go back of how selling is helping, if you follow the 2 steps of first focus, not on your product, but on the person you're trying to influence, what they want. And then secondly, align your dialogue with questions that actually match that. Then you probably have a higher result in getting what you want or selling your idea or product to the person you'd like to influence.
Okay, so quick survey. There might be a slight bias in the room, but based on what we've been talking about, so trying to put aside our negative perceptions of sales and salespeople, having a more positive view of selling, that it's actually about helping people. A bit of structure and a more customer-focused way, as Jen talked about, where you're focusing on them and you're asking more questions, not doing all the talking, not doing all the telling. What type of person would be better in sales or selling? So put up your hands if you think that would be men. Put up your hands if you think it would be women. But do we actually believe it? So I've had the pleasure of having and working with many sales managers, thousands and thousands of salespeople, even doing research projects, and Jen does a lot of this now in this region, going out with salespeople, observing them, and by far the best salespeople and sales managers that I've worked with have been women. And it is quite fun that in my business now, where we're working with teams around developing their team culture and the team dynamics, we often use a tool called leveraging diversity, which is all about getting leaders to think about the diversity in their team. And this particular tool looks at a number of different traits: competition, collaboration, individualism, inclusivity, physical impact, psychological impact, just as some examples. Often we're presenting to groups where it's primarily men in the room, but they're recognizing they need more diversity. And it's not until the end of the session that we actually reveal which of the traits are more masculine and which are more feminine, which are more inherent in women and which are more inherent in men. And that's where they suddenly realize that the imbalances that they have could be solved quite quickly by bringing in more women into the team. As a generalization, certainly bringing those traits in which are more likely to be found in women. So, one of them though, which relates very much to this subject, based on not a survey like we just did there, which is not scientific, but based on some more rigorous sort of research, is one of the traits that's more common in women is called psychological impact. When it's done well, this is what we see: interest in other people and how they work, good at motivating others, get to the core of the problem through understanding people, consider others when making decisions, and listens attentively and understands problems. Sound familiar to some of you? I hope many of you do a lot of that a lot of the time. So the actual traits which are helpful in selling are not the things that we often associate with selling. When I asked you think of salespeople or selling, what gender came to mind? Men in suits with ties. My favorite sales tip I was ever given was you should wear a brightly colored tie. Why? Because people's eye line will go up and down the tie, and they're already nodding, so they're getting closer to a yes. Seriously, this stuff is in books. Yeah. But so a lot of sales traits are associated with men. The reality is, as a generalization, if you can tap into the inherent qualities that you have as women, then you will by virtue be a stronger salesperson. So we wish you all the best on that. We want to wrap up with part 2, another version of how our little acting performance could have gone. Trying to put some, Alistair now is going to try and put some of this into practice. As you recommended, I've got some notes.
I wonder what outcomes you put
I'm
me
not
down
necessarily
for.
recommending you should take notes to a date. Here's some questions I prepared earlier based on my perceptions of your needs. Sorry, disregard all that. So, what do you do?
I work for SAP.
Oh wow, big company. What do you do there?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I run some programs for new consultants across the region. I organize all of their training.
Wow.
It's really fun.
You must be busy though.
Yeah, it's busy. You know, the normal thing here, busy.
Do you have time for hobbies and other interests?
I do my best.
What's your favourite thing to do when you've got some time for yourself?
This might kind of sound strange to you, but I have my pilot's license.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I go to Quain and I rent planes and clock in a few hours.
Wow. I noticed a bit of an accent. Where are you from?
I'm from Germany.
Oh, wow. Which part?
Frankfurt.
Oh, that's such a beautiful city. I actually travel there quite regularly.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I noticed you have an accent too. Where are you from?
New Zealand?
I lived in Auckland.
No way.
Yeah.
For how long?
Yeah, I was there for 3.5 years. I love the Kiwis.
Great. Now, this is the honest truth. The first version of the conversation took place. He never found out. I knew, so I was watching the train crash. She has her pilot's license. Not only that, he travels and does those test flights to the same part of Germany where she was from. And amazingly, he was a Kiwi and she had lived in New Zealand even though she was German. And they both went to Quain to explore their flying options. So it was just one of those incredible situations where everything was there. It should have worked, but he took a certain alternative approach to selling, and it didn't work out quite so well. So what are the key insights? Check in on what your perceptions of selling are. Maybe push them aside, and focus on what's been important to me. The selling is actually helping people, helping them in some way get the benefits. Sometimes you don't win them all. Sometimes what you are offering isn't actually what they need. But if you've helped them make the decision, then you'll feel good about that, and they'll feel good in terms of the trust as well. And
your next step is to really, really observe and examine your focus. Are you focusing a lot on your product or service, or are you focusing on the customer about what they need and their outcomes? And the next step is, if you want to sell, don't tell. Make sure in all your sales interactions that your questioning is much more than your talking.
Great. And lastly, may not be relevant for all of you, but just keep away from the Emirates pilots. So thank you very much.
Thank you.